screen, so I assume your screen is on it, but that may not be the case. Let's go for it. The topic of this particular slide is called Time to Exit. 1, 2, or 3 hour rating for Chapter 7, Fire Restrictive Construction. We're talking about wall assemblies, fire and smoke resistant assemblies, and overview some of the passive systems that we can add to a building material that will allow it to increase a longer span of time for escape and safety. Get a little of the understand fire restrictive construction is the goal of IBC Chapter 7. It also goes to contain fire to room of origin, learn about firewalls and how they differ from fire barriers, and understand horizontal assembly. Here's what we have to look forward to. I do like this method of now actually to show you where, so in future homework, I'll hope that you will cite the page according to the numbers that are shown and maybe subsets. So you don't have to write everything out. If you can cite me where you're pulling this from, then you will have done your job, as we will mention to it. But Section 7 is, like in all of them, the O1 is dedicated to general overview of what you can expect. And then O2, as we've seen in all of these, gives you a definition so you know exactly what the code is talking about. Sometimes you can say, well, what is a wall temperature referring to? So this way, if I'm going to go see Morgan or Morgan, we have an issue. When I'm in court, I can speak to the word and what the code's meant as in the book. But a lot of things in code are not spelled out so clearly as you will find the definition are, and that's what you anchor yourself. 703 section talks about fire resistant ratings and fire tests. 04 is the exterior walls, which is our first topic. 05 is firewalls, special conditions that we call it firewall. It's been enhanced. It's that 7 1/4 inch wall or something like it. That's going to be a firewall, and then there's a fire barrier. There are shaft enclosures. When you go out to a staircase, when you go to an elevator, you need special places. These shaft enclosures is considered one item. You need this so it offers an area of refuge, or in the case that you might be in an elevator during a fire and get stuck, you need to be extra secure in your place. There are fire partitions to learn about, smoke barriers, and horizontal assemblies. But there's more. Fire's big. Fire's probably the biggest thing in code because many professions depend on it. But fire marshal is really involved with you when you start looking at fire codes. We look at 711, which is penetrations. Everything has to be sealed off. We've got fire resistant joints. We have fire resistant rating of structural members and opening protection. There's also, we do have to consider ourselves what happens with mechanical dust and air transport. Those penetrate several different walls, and they're unseen to us. We don't even know what happens, but we need to stop smoke getting into these ventilators and doing something we don't want to expect. We have concealed spaces as seen in McDonald's, that extra roof that was on there. They plastered over existing elements, just cover it up real quick, no one will care. But that creates concealed spaces, which are things that just happen. Someone builds over something else and doesn't let anyone else know it's there. We have fire resistant requirements for plaster. Then you get the 718 thermal and sound insulation materials. 719, restrictive fire resistance, and 720, calculated fire resistance. So it's very detailed, it's branch. Teacup in here, teacup. Okay, and probably have the lights going on, so let's. 75% of all codes deal with fire and life safety. Interior fire-related codes focus on protecting the occupant and allowing time to evacuate during a fire. The ultimate goal is to contain the fire in the moving origin. Okay. Here's a hallway catching fire, effective smoke ventilation in a residential building. Fire codes include provisions for both fire protection and smoke protection. More people die from asphyxiation due to smoke than burns. And it can happen very fast. This is one of the great concerns of firefighters going into a fire is the smoke can overcome against their heavy equipment. The first part discusses passive fire systems, which are all the things that we can do to our materials to enhance their capabilities and guarantee a longer outcome. This is just one. These systems focus on prohibiting and containing fires. Passive things include things like coating, mortar, special things, parts that use pipe steel, and anything that's going through a pipe or it's penetrating a wall that you can seal around. Different kinds of acrylics, and special paints, fire restrictive paints. Passive systems. Once in place, nothing else has to occur from them to be part of the control of the fire. I like that. That's easy, right? Because if you know what you're getting, you don't have to. You just depend on 1 hour burn, and it should be safe. Once in place, nothing else has to occur from them to be part of the control of the fire. These are fire and smoke barriers and partitions, horizontal assemblies such as the floors and ceilings, opening protectives for windows and doors, and through protection, which are fire stops and dampers. All the little parts of the building that are open and exposed plugged up. And then there's also, which we saw in the video, here's a whole other condition. And this affects interior designer. Okay, so we just looked at fire stops. We're looking at ways that we can prevent the fire from spreading into our adjoining room. And we're also going to start thinking about not just vertical, not just what's happening next door, but also what's happening upstairs. And you should not be able to see from one floor to the next around a masonry chimney, which is one of the weak points. Things that go up vertically, and that's a pretty good example. Active systems. Here's the other type. Our other type. These are systems that are considered active because they have to be activated in order to work. What's called suppression systems, they are now called extinguishing systems. So that's a little confusing for us older users. Extinguishing system. These can include detection systems, extinguishing and suppression systems, and emergency lighting. We have the examples of that in this room. Yes. Where is the emergency lighting in this room? Remember things that you see out in the field. See if I can switch over for a second. Yeah. Elements are a space of a building that assists in directing the occupants to a place of safety. The means of egress. If you're ever in trouble, you can always find a public room that has a map of how to get out of here. There's space over there. And then there's communication systems. There's going to be a locality that you can find fire protection systems. own fire codes, Florida being one. Priority of the fire marshal. They go like, some of these are more stringent than our codes. Remember, ICC is bare minimum, and if the Florida Fire Protection Code or something like it, once the AHJ deems it necessary, they can add on to the codes. Compartmentation. The overall concept of a passive fire protection system. Compartmentation. I'll have to check my Wikipedia to see if that's how you say it. Separation of areas in the building to control fire and smoke by the use of wall assemblies, floor assemblies, and ceiling assemblies. Compartments are created by fire-resistant grading assemblies, which include firewalls, fire barriers, horizontal assemblies, and fire protection. Okay, so see some of our drawings, what they'll look like. As a result, fire can spread only over the area before immediate resistance from the graded assembly. The party wall. Something you separate every residence into different kinds of families, different residential units. Firewalls are not usually added to an existing building within or between buildings creating two or more separate buildings. And if you're going to have secular occupancy, you create a party wall and provides complete vertical separation of areas in the building. There were many party walls at the Super Bowl. Correct statement. Firewall extends from the slab to the roof and from the exterior wall to the exterior wall. Firewall, a parapet is a firewall that extends above the roof. And these are rated 3 to 4 hours typically. The minimum is 2 hours. And see table 706.4 for rating by occupancy. Avoid penetrating the firewall because of their durability and their rating. You can go around them or find some way through. Here's a concrete masonry firewall. Okay, so they have mineral wool fire stop insulation where the two joints meet. You have the angle clip. You can't fasten underneath the slab and both sides of the wall. Then ground reinforced. Solid CMU at the top course, so you don't want to stop those voids from happening in the space. And fireproof sealant as required. That's pretty heavy duty. So you got a lot of things going into that. Protected. There are 3 main classifications. A firewall is a wall separating structures or buildings, or a wall subdividing a building to prevent the spread of fire. Having a fire resistance rating and independent structural stability. A fire barrier wall is a fire-rated wall assembly, typically not structurally self-sufficient and does not extend to the roof. A high-challenge firewall is a wall used to separate transformers, structures, and buildings. A wall subdividing buildings with a high fire challenge occupancy and structural stability. There are barriers, horizontal assemblies, and fire partitions. And doing definitions, fire barrier are walls that have a fire resistant rating and must be continuous from the floor to the ceiling assembly. Extends to the ceiling, joints are sealed, and the number of doors and windows are limited. Fire barriers. Horizontal assemblies serve the same function as fire barriers that extends horizontally from one rigid wall to another. Here is a feature design. Fire partitions are similar to fire barriers but have less restrictive requirements. It does not always have to be a full enclosure from the floor to the ceiling above. Typically a 1-hour rating, and the example is an exit access corridor. New construction should identify barriers and partitions and 30-foot intervals. Acoustically enhanced gypsum board may be used as an additional layer on both sides require rated all assemblies. The profile illustrated is a 1 hour